Good evening. Welcome to part 3. I titled this, God Didn't Write This Book, Man Did, and it shows. Okay, and please check out parts 1 and 2. You ever read a book so chaotic, so full of contradictions, you'd swear 5 people wrote it in a group chat while drunk, and then lost half the messages? Yep, that's the Bible. Now, I don't mean to step on your grandma's rosary beads, but let's say this slow and clear. God didn't write this book. People did. and not just any people, ancient, tribal people, patriarchal folks, right? Who thought the earth was flat and women were property. So let's start with the obvious. If an all-knowing, perfect God wrote a book, would it really need 4 different conflicting versions of the same story? I mean, how many ways do you need to tell the resurrection before you admit somebody's copy-pasting from the wrong scroll? Matthew says there was one angel at the tomb. Mark says, it was a young man, and Luke says it was 2. And John says Mary was alone. Then not alone. Then Jesus shows up dressed like a gardener. Well, I've seen more consistent storytelling on TikTok, I think. And those are just the Gospels. Don't even get me started on the genocide commands in the Old Testament. You think a loving God whispered, kill every man, woman, child, and goat into Moses' ear, and then followed it with, but remember, I am love. That's not holy. That's schizophrenia. Well, here's the sauce, the kicker, the truth bomb, if you want to call it. None of the original manuscripts exist. Not one. What we've got are copies of copies of copies, written decades, even centuries after the supposed events. And most of the New Testament wasn't written by who the title claims. Scholars now admit that books like 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus, fake signatures, forgeries, and I'm not talking out of my elbows here, people. I've got some notes, evidence here. All right, here we go. Where am I? Bart Ehrman, Gnostic and New Testament scholar, former evangelical, in his books, misquoting Jesus, Jesus Interrupted, he says here, quote, the author of 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, and Titus was not Paul. These were forged in his name to lend authority to the views being expressed. All right. Moving ahead, Raymond E. Brown, Catholic priest, leading New Testament scholar. Well, he classifies the epistles, 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus, as likely pseudonymous due to differences in vocabulary, theology, and historical context. The New Oxford Annotated Bible notes that the pastoral epistles reflect a later development in church structure, not present during Paul's lifetime. Udo Schnelli, The History and Theology of the New Testament Writers. notes clear linguistic and stylistic differences from Paul's authentic letters like Romans or Galatians. The pastoral epistles use over 30% vocabulary that never appears in Paul's other writings. And I'm going to put these other quotes. I don't want to bore you with them, but important point is, why does this matter? It matters because Christians, and I've done this for many, many years, claim the Bible is divinely inspired and without error. But if the letters were falsely signed in Paul's name, that means what? Forgery made it into the so-called Word of God. And what else? Church authority was manufactured, not ordained. And these writings cannot be from Paul if he was already dead when they were written. And much of the strict gender and leadership, rules like women being silent in church come from these suspect letters. Got it? Well, if this was a college essay, Jesus would have flunked out of plagiarism. Well, now if you say that to a believer, really, they'll say, but it's the inspired Word of God. Inspired? Bro, so is Kendrick Lamar. Doesn't mean God wrote it, right? The book was assembled like a mixtape by committee at the Council of Nicaea and beyond. Power-hungry bishops deciding what makes the cut and what gets tossed into the heresy bin. It was politics dressed up as prophecy. And the cherry on top of the sundae would be, they say God is eternal, but this book is stuck in time. Well, time for a coffee break. Be right back. Whoa, that was a quick one. The Bible talks about slavery like it's business as usual. Women can't speak in church. Shellfish is a sin, but we're supposed to believe it applies perfectly to today, to modern life. That's like using a scroll to fix your iPhone. Wrong century, wrong tool. So look, I'm not here to insult your faith, your family's faith. I'm just saying, if this was God's final draft, he needs a better editor. And if he's omniscient, he saw all the blood this book would justify. Crusades and what else? Witch burnings, colonization, and still published it. This ain't divine, people. This is man's attempt to speak for God. And just like every ventriloquist act, the dummy's lips are moving, but it's the puppeteer behind the curtain that's got the real voice. Right? Well, I'm done. Stay tuned for part 4. More to come.